3. It's preparing. Okay, let's go.
All right, everyone, welcome. Stefano Biscotto from the Roman Colosseum. Sorry, Luca. I'm actually in Santa Monica today, but we have a nice group here today. We have a group from San Francisco. We have a group from San Diego and Orange County. We have a few customers, so it should be a fun 45 minutes here. I just want to say a few words before we get started here. With this difficult time here, I think it's an important time to highlight our Chambers DI portfolio, direct imports. We have now almost 20 producers that are directly imported with no national importers. So they come from the winery and they go directly to the distributor, an importer, which would be Chambers and Chambers. Suzanne Chambers has been doing this for over 45 years. The wines are hand selected. They're hand selected. They're normally sustainable, if not organically certified or biodynamic. There's no interaction in the middle, just a thin layer between the end customer, restaurateur, retailer, and us. So it's a great system. And normally Luca gets in at 30, 40, 50% less than it would through regular channels. So it's a great value system, and our DI portfolio is growing incrementally through the years here. So we're very proud of it, and it really defines who we are as a company, our direct imports. So everyone, this is Luca Demarchi. Luca, I've had the pleasure of working, and you have too, with his father for so many years. His father is, he's kind of a legend in many ways too, a humble legend, I call him. And as you all know, he's not from Tuscany, he's from Piemonte. And this is kind of the lifelong dream of Paolo and now Luca, is to resurrect their childhood in Piemonte. And that legacy now continues with Proprieta Sperino. I'm going to hand it over to Luca very soon here, but it's a dynamic area. It's an area that everyone's talking about, Alto Piemonte. This cluster of villages represents so much wine energy and so much excitement. So it's definitely one of the more up and coming areas in Italy. Luca, in a way, I always joke around, Luca in a way is the consultant at Isola Olena, and Paolo Demarchi is the consultant at Proprieta Sperino. So they work hand in hand, Luca and Paolo. So they both help each other out. Luca is the boss though of Proprieta Sperino. He runs the company, he runs the winery, he makes all the decision, and Paolo consults very closely with Luca in the Piemonte project. So Luca, I want to turn it over to you right away. Maybe talk about all the villages in the area and what makes it notable. Everyone, Luca Demarchi, all'attacco.
Hello everybody, and good morning for you, I guess. And I really hope that we can slowly move through this surreal moment. I mean, Italy in Piemonte, where I live now, it's a place where it's been hit a lot by the actual situation. But finally, a few days ago, we started to lose a bit and lockdown, to move around a bit. So hopefully that's a good sign that somehow things will fix in the near future. I don't know, but thank you for being here. As Stefano was saying, we are in both regions, Tuscany and Piemonte. And yes, my father, Paolo, he prefers to be the final living legend, Stefano, because right. Time to time legends are not so living anymore. But, so he was born in Piemonte and he moved to Tuscany, and I did the other way. So I was born in Florence, actually, in Isola Olena, and I moved to Piemonte for university, which is quite funny to say, but actually, when I moved to Piemonte, it was not to study winemaking. I was not really interested in wine. I was in medieval literature, which is much more an historical matter, and probably that has really given me a different point of view on wine in general. When I fell in love with Lessona, was really falling in love with the history of Alto Piemonte. It is true, Stefano was saying that it's quite a hot area now. And I think it's the reason why it's so interesting is both because of the style of the wines that can come from the area, but also, and I think more, because it's such a new area, but with an incredibly long history. So somehow it's something new, but where there is a lot to say. So I think it's something really worth to know better. There is a lot of new projects going on, so it's something that you will cross more and more in the near future, I think. I'm pretty sure that California is one of the biggest markets for Alto Piemonte today in the world. So it's you probably know a lot of what I'm going to say, but I want to first do a quick resume on what is Alto Piemonte, on its history, on its geology, and why it was abandoned, and then focus a bit more on Lessona, which is where we are, and then in Sperino, in fact. So here, yeah, somehow we lost the screen, I guess, but we should show a map of Alto Piemonte somehow.
Coming up.
Do you want me
Bear
to
with me.
share my screen, maybe?
No, hold on. I'm going to bring up the map. But continue talking, Luca, and I'll bring up the
Right.
speed.
Okay, good. So something that, as I said, I moved to Torino for medieval literature, and my father suddenly in '99 he decided to recover the old family estate. So somehow the Sperino was the old family estate, which was abandoned at the beginning of the 20th century. And then my grandfather bought, in the 50s, bought Isola Olena in Tuscany. And so my family moved to Tuscany. But somehow Sperino stayed always in the family, even if abandoned. And finally, my father in '99 decided to recover it. And at the time was, we planted a few hectares, and nobody was there to work. And I was living in Torino. And so I started going in Lessona in the vineyards to manage the property. Alto Piemonte was, at the time, one of the wealthiest areas of Europe because of his textile industrial development. So it's a huge textile district somehow. And this kind of development has completely erased the viticulture heritage. And somehow, when I was going to Lessona, I was kind of feeling of, I wouldn't say guilty, but almost, versus previous generations that made Alto Piemonte so great in the past and that were completely forgotten. Today, again, it's quite a hot area, but when we replanted the first vineyard in 2000, honestly, nobody knew anything about Alto Piemonte. Nobody knew anything, not even in Milan or Torino, which are less than 1 hour driving away. So it was something really that needed and deserved to be rebuilt somehow. You have to imagine, this is the map of what we call today Alto Piemonte. So it's quite a high density of appellations. It's 9 appellations today, with very little vineyards nowadays. But you have to imagine that this area, which you see, so you have Lessona on the western, as a western appellation, and Boca as eastern appellation. It is about 20 minutes driving, so Lessona to Boca. So somehow this is the size of the area. It's a very, very small area. It's less than 20 miles long, so very, very small. But somehow this area, until the end of 19th century, was close to 40,000 hectares, which means, I don't know, 120,000 acres, more or less, of vineyards, which is a huge number. To help you understanding how big this number is, today, the entire Piemonte has more or less 42,000 hectares of vineyards. So at the end of 19th century, this small portion of Piemonte had more or less the same vineyards as today, the entire Piemonte. It's quite impressive. It's quite amazing to see today. And then almost everything just got lost. We went from close to 40,000 hectares to less than 600 hectares in less than 20 years. So that was a huge tsunami. It was probably the biggest loss that wine world has ever seen in terms of surface. It was such a big thing that you have many reasons probably that have caused this kind of collapse. Definitely the industrial development that was so much easier to make money going into industry. Then suddenly the railway, so Milano was very close, Torino very close. We are less than 1 hour from Switzerland, so people had probably too many alternatives at one point just to carry on the vineyards. And also because of how difficult it is to actually produce here. It's an area with very low yields because of climate conditions, very difficult, and because of soils condition, very, very acidic soils. We will see why these and how this will affect the wines somehow. But first we look how the area is organized, because again, you will more and more go through all these appellations in the market. So you have to imagine we are up there just on the foothill of the Alps, and Alto Piemonte has this river, Sesia River, that you might see there. Actually, I'm sorry, but the picture doesn't look too clear. Maybe it's a little mistake.
blurry.
But this
Sorry
river, this river comes from Monte Rosa, which is the second highest peak of the Alps, and flows down and would divide Alto Piemonte in two wide appellations. It's a bit like Côte d'Or. You might be more familiar. You have Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuit, and then the Village. Here would be more or less the same. So you have the west side of the river, which is called Coste della Sesia, the coteau of the Sesia River, and the villages of Lessona, Bramaterra, and Gattinara. So this is the Coste della Sesia area. Then on the east side of the Sesia River, you will have a wide appellation, which is called Colline Novaresi. And you have in the north, Boca, south, Gemme, then Sizzano, and then Fara. So this is the bunch of appellations. It's a 95% a red wine area and mostly Nebbiolo. You have three appellations, Lessona, Gattinara, and Gemme, which might be 100% Nebbiolo. The rest is blends with other local varieties. What unifies Alto Piemonte, what defines Alto Piemonte as a single area? It's the acidity of the soils, given the geological history, we will quickly see later, and the climate condition. What makes every village different is the specific kind of soils and the blend. So you will actually, after a little time in tasting this kind of wines, you will actually quite easily recognize one appellation from the other. I will move to the next picture. Stefano. Oh, okay, so here's just to show. So this is Lessona. So you see it's just right on the mountains. In less than half an hour, we go skiing, just to tell you how close we are to the mountains. But it's not mountain wines. So this is very, very important. Climate conditions are very strange. I do not consider Alto Piemonte as mountain wine. So nothing to do with Valtellina, with Val d'Aosta. It's actually very, very different. We will see why. Next one. Oh, so here this is something that might look a little boring, but I think this is essential to understand Alto Piemonte, the geological evolution. This goes back to about 180 million years ago, when world was Pangaea, so one single piece of land. To put it on a timeline, what is considered very old soils in France, like, I don't know, Burgundy maybe, or some parts of Alsace, is about 150 million years old. In Italy, the other great Nebbiolo area, which is Langhe, is something between 5 to 15 million years old. So here we start, the geological history here starts about 180 million years ago. When the world was Pangaea, where today you have Alto Piemonte, you had a huge super volcano, which is, you know, the flat ones. You have Yosemite over there and something, which at that time has exploded. So all the magma from the down there in the center of the earth has come up and has melted in this big exploded volcano in a very, very strange concentration of metals and minerals. A lot of aluminum, a lot of iron, a lot of magnesium. So a lot of and different metals have melted there. Then slowly the platforms have separated, as you see in the second line. And then finally, about 60 million years ago, Europe and Africa collapsed and they create the Alps. So the Alps were created because Africa has overtaken Europe, and somehow this movement has lifted up the Alps. This is true in the Alps, except in this area, because there was still this huge volcano, this fossilized super volcano there that made opposition to this movement. And so Africa pushing into Europe has actually flipped this volcano. So today, what are Alto Piemonte soils? They are actually the roots of this prehistoric volcano that were brought to surface. This is, which is quite incredible, because I find it always very fascinating. But when we walk in the vineyards here in Alto Piemonte, we are actually walking on soil that in the rest of the world, it's, I don't know, 30 miles down there. It's quite crazy, but it's the very, very deep layers brought to surface. So very unique kind of soils. You have probably the only viticultural made in 0% calcium soils. So very strange, very low pH, and impressive amount of metals. I always take as example potassium, which is what delivers the kind of savory side of the wines. In Lessona, it's more than 2,000 the average of what you have in Italian wines in that. So it's quite crazy, actually. Go on. So
interesting. Luca, is this geological expression, volcanic geological expression?
Yes. So
throughout the territory, or is Lessona, Bramaterra, it expands
it's very
villages on both sides of the river?
This is in both sides of the river. This is the center of this volcano was where today is Gattinara, Bramaterra, and Boca. So I would say that Bramaterra, Gattinara, and Boca, that was actually the roots of the volcano. And the other appellations around were actually affected by this flipping, but in different ways. So Lessona, which it's right on the side of Bramaterra, when the volcano has flipped it, it has taken the prehistoric marine sands and brought it to surface. So actually Lessona is on sea sand. We will see then the examples of the soil, but prehistoric sea sands, so sea sands of more than 200 million years ago. So very acidic, very poor sea sands. This is the Monte Rosa seen from the Piemonte side. And this is again quite impressive, and is a consequence of this volcano flipping. Because of the Alps here not being created by this slow movement of Africa, but this volcano flipping, here they are very, very vertical. You have to consider that the Piemonte side of the of the Monte Rosa, it's close to 3,000 meters, which I have no idea how it's in feet, but well, it's huge, in completely vertical. So somehow the mountains here are actually a natural wall protecting Alto Piemonte from northern winds. So it's a very strange climate situation here, because we have a very, very mild winter time, which is the opposite of mountain wine. So if you think Valtellina, if you think Val d'Aosta, Savoie, etc., usually winter is very cold. The bud breaking is very late because of the cold winter. Then you have quite a warm summertime in those places. Then maturation goes very quick. Then harvest is quite early, because then you have winter again. Here, because of the way the mountains were created, is actually almost the opposite. We have this natural wall made by Monte Rosa here, which protect us from northern winds. So wintertime is very mild. We have no snow usually. We have palm trees, banana trees in the winery, for example. And so the bud breaking is very, very early. So what defines Alto Piemonte is an incredibly early bud breaking, average 10 days to 2 weeks earlier than Langhe. But then summertime, it's quite fresh actually, because we have the glacier of the Monte Rosa, which are actually right above us. So in summertime, you always have cold wind coming from the mountains down. And so maturation is much, much slower. We have a very mild, again, summertime, and we harvest very late. So what defines Alto Piemonte in general? It's a very slow maturation, which gives very smooth tannins, keep freshness somehow, and gives a bit more aromatics. Okay, so here you have some of what is the soils in the Supervulcano area. So you have the granites, incredibly old granites, which look like very, very strong. And when you take it in your hand, they just melt down into powder somehow. You might have those kind of blocks, which are just iron and magnesium melted together. And this is very, very typical of, again, Boca, Gattinara, and Bramaterra. We have more or less 5 acres in Bramaterra, and the pictures are taken there. So this is actually the soil in the vineyards in Bramaterra. In Lessona, next picture.
And you'll be releasing, Luca, you'll be releasing a Bramaterra wine shortly, am I correct?
We will do. We have the vineyard since the beginning in Bramaterra. We have bought those vineyards from an old guy that was stopping immediately in 2004. So immediately in the first vintage we had, but I was never really happy with the results. And then we have problems with hail, which is the major problem of the area. And so we never had the constancy in production. We never had the quality I was expecting. Finally, in 2015, I'm happy enough to think to release a Bramaterra. We still haven't decided how, when, but this will be something that in next couple of years will be defined, definitely. So today, all of our Bramaterra grapes are into the Uvaggio wine. We will go through the wines later. So this is Lessona. Lessona soil is just pure sea sand. What is interesting is that, again, that's the bottom of the Tetide, of the prehistoric sea that was brought up when the volcano has flipped it and has made kind of a spoon on that sea bottom and brought it up in surface. Very, very unique soil. For what I know of wine world, there are not other areas which have this specific prehistoric sand with, again, 0% calcium and huge amount of potassium of what you have in the granites. So let's say Bramaterra, Gattinara, Boca, it's usually wines which have a little more power, but a bit more rusticity. A lot of iron in those wines. So somehow you have a little, that kind of, in Italy we say sanguigno, this kind of blood taste somehow because of that amount of iron, which is really incredible. So this would be more, again, Bramaterra, Boca, Gattinara. Here, in the sandy soils, you lose completely the rusticity. You don't have that much iron, but you have more potassium. So usually in sandy soils, the wines get a little lighter, a bit more refined in tannins, and much more played on the length, on that kind of savory sensation on the length. So this is how I would recognize Alessona. Less ironish, less earthy, less rustic, a bit more gentle, a bit. Of course, probably Lessona is actually the more far away from the common idea of Nebbiolo as an incredibly powerful wine. It's a bit more on the gentle side, I would say. Next. Oh, this is a picture I love. This is nothing, but actually shows something that to me is quite magical, because given this very slow maturation, we harvest very late. So again, bud breaking early, harvesting very late. I have never harvested Nebbiolo before mid-October. We have harvested already a few vintages early in November, so very, very late. But what I love is here, you see, there are very few areas where the, let's say, compenetration in between climate condition, the vine variety, soil compounds lead to a maturation that goes exactly along. The grapes will mature along with the vine. So we harvest when the leaves start to fall down. This is very, very strange, because usually you will see harvest and then a perfectly green vineyard, which somehow to me would sound strange, because it's like you didn't take everything that you could. I mean, the vine is still working. But here, this is how we usually harvest. And there is, of course, no word maturation, actually. This is at perfect maturation, the vineyard has finished his work here. So that's why I always put this picture, because I love it. Go. Okay, I just wanted to spend a few words on what the varieties are in Alto Piemonte. So, of course, Nebbiolo is the major one. We are all familiar with Nebbiolo. What you have to know is that for us in Piemonte, we never use Nebbiolo, but we use the plural. We say Nebbioli, because it's a big family. There is a lot of biotypes inside. There is the Picotendro in Val d'Aosta. There is Chiavenasca in Valtellina. You will have Miquet, Lampia in Langhe. And locally, there was this grape called Spanna, and everybody was saying that Spanna was a synonym of Nebbiolo, but I thought it's impossible. We might have our local biotype of Nebbiolo. So immediately when I arrived here in 2000, I started a work with the university to go in the old forest, take the small shoots of the old vines alive, and started a selection. And finally, that was 4 years ago, we have certified the first clones of Spanna. Now it's 9 clones that have been certified here in Sperino vineyards, which are available for everybody. So slowly now in Alto Piemonte, people is actually planting new vineyards with the local clone of Nebbiolo, which is Spanna. So Nebbiolo. You know, of course, late ripening, powerful in tannins, very fresh, etc. I always say that Nebbiolo is not a grape; it's a state of the mind. It's something that it's very strange. People usually does not like Nebbiolo when they start to drink, but then they get used to it and they need it. So very strange. It's something that you shouldn't like. No color, too much tannin, acidity there, but then you just fall in love with it. So it's something that actually goes straight to your mind. I don't know. The second one, which is Vespolina. Vespolina, it's almost a just Alto Piemonte variety. You have a little bit of Vespolina in Oltrepò Pavese and in Colli Tortonesi, but it's mostly in Alto Piemonte. Apparently, Vespolina has originated in Gemme, but it's difficult to say. Somebody would say that the original Gemme was 100% Vespolina, but I don't know. It's very close genetically to Nebbiolo. So it's actually very related. It might be kind of a cousin or maybe the uncle, we still don't know. For a few years, the university was saying that actually Vespolina was the mother of Nebbiolo genetically. Now they have discovered some Valtellina variety that is more suitable to be the mother. So they don't know exactly, but it's very close. They melt very, very well. It was in the past was not really vinified pure. Now, because it's fashionable to just discover the old last variety, people will start to vinify the pure Vespolina. I don't think, honestly, it has the complexity to make a wine on its own, but I love it in the blend. It's incredibly spicy, amazing white pepper smell, much darker than Nebbiolo in terms of color, more tannins than Nebbiolo, honestly, but a bit more rusticity in the wine. So I would consider it that delivers the most powerful wines of Alto Piemonte, but in a slightly rustic way. I love it in the blend, keeps the wine alive, again, adds some complexity in the aromas because of the spiciness especially, but I still don't see a reason to vinify it pure, except just because there is a market for this kind of, Greek wines, or I don't know. Last one is Croatina. Croatina, it's a bit more used. It's what is called Bonarda in Argentina, for example. There is a lot of Croatina in Alto Papavese. It's one of the grapes of Valpolicella. So somehow it's used more or less in the Alps in general. I don't like it too much, I have to be honest. The reason why it was used, I think that it's because it's very big clusters, and the farmers of the 19th century, probably they love to see their big clusters in their hands, I don't know. And because the skin is very, very thick. And in an area like Alto Piemonte, where you have a lot of hail, it's probably the easier grape to get safe up to the harvest. Dark color, very fruity in the aromas, but to me, incredibly rustic. That's why in Alto Papavese is always sparkling. So somehow you raise a bit of those greenish tannins. Go, quick overview on the grapes. And then I just show a small couple of pictures on what we do at Sperino in vinification. So what I thought, it's very difficult to explain this now, but when we started in 2000, again, Alto Piemonte was not known at all. There were no wineries. There were no wineries. There were a few historical wineries, and very few were starting or trying to get into quality. And what was at the time, what the estate were trying to do was they were kind of hiring winemakers from Lange and try to improve their quality that way. But of course, somebody from Lange would come here and vinify as it was a Barolo. And so somehow looking for something that was not in the grapes, looking for powerful wines. So what we decided at Sperino was that we would make wine exactly the way the wine was made when the era was famous. We were very lucky because Sperino, our relatives, in the 19th century, they were very, very much scientific oriented. They were the founders of the Royal Academy for Science. They were the directors of the medicine school in Torino. And so they were taking notes of everything. So we can really rebuild the way wines were made. We have analyses of more than 100 years, more than 100 vintages. So what we do, selection of the grapes, it's gravity-fed open wood tanks, which is not used at all for Nebbiolo, actually, well, not that much. Then natural fermentation, there is nothing. It's very simple winery. There's no La Prossima Foto, Stefano, no temperature control. So this is the winery, very simple, just open wood tanks, no temperature control, it's spontaneous fermentation.
This is both Uvaggio and Lissona?
Lissona, yes, both, not rosé. So rosé is completely different. But Uvaggio and Lissona, they're both vinified here. Very, very simple. We do use sulfite, so it's not what is self-called today a natural wine. So there is sulfites after malo and in the bottling, but that's the only thing that we would add. There is no yeast cultivated, there is nothing. Next. Oh, okay, so this was just for, because it's funny, but so just manual punching down or just jumping into the vats and just pressing. And so very, very old style vinification. La prossima. And then we are very lucky. We have this amazing 19th century winery. This is the castle of Lessona where the Proprieta Sperino is. So amazing, beautiful underground winery. We have, after fermentation, it goes directly into the 500 liters that you see on your right for malo, and then it's racked, the wine is racked into the big barrels. We have an aging of more than 2 years for Uvaggio and for 3.5 years for Lessona. So very traditional style of aging in the wines. This is true for the reds, not for rosé. We will quickly talk. Oh, this is something I love. We have, this was one of the very first areas in Italy, but also in Europe, actually, to bottle the wine. We have not every vintage, they were not really keeping every vintage, but we have a lot of vintages starting from 1817. So there is a lot of wine in the winery. I love to show the old pictures that you see here, because I think these two pictures, they would tell you a lot of things. First of all, that my father has stolen the pictures for the label for Ceparello, because actually the Ceparello label comes from the old Lessona label. Second, that it will show you how good in communication they were at the time. You see, you have two different labels. One is Spanna, so Nebbiolo secco, so dry, and the other one is the Passito version. But the first label, it was estate growth grapes, and so it was Proprieta Sperino. The second label, the Passito, was a negoce, and so was Villa Sperino. So they were already explaining to the market in the 19th century the difference in between estate growth and negoce somehow. You have the, I don't know if it's easy to see it, but you see Proprieta Sperino is in Lessona. So you have to imagine that the appellations in Italy, they started in 62. This is how the appellation started. So the wine was called Lessona because Proprieta Sperino was in Lessona. Today, we always tend to confuse appellations as a technique, as a know-how. It's called Barolo because it's 100% Nebbiolo and it stays 4 years in barrel. Not true. It's called Barolo because it comes from Barolo. It's in Barolo. If you have 5% Barbera, who cares? I mean, it's the geographical location that produces the wine. It's the vineyard, it's the soil, it's the climate, and that's how the appellation actually started. The wine was simply called Lessona because the winery was in Lessona.
So Luca, last time I saw you, we had a pretty epic evening in Sacramento, and we had the pleasure of drinking the 1878 Lessona, courtesy of Daryl Cordy. And not a lot of people realize that what happens to Nebbiolo over the years, it's stripped of its anthocyanins and tannin, and it actually discolors. So it's a white wine. It's a white Nebbiolo over the years. So when we drank this that evening, the 1878, it was actually white in color. Yeah. And you could see the stains around the edge of the bottle from the red, because when it was red, it had the red wine stains. And the 1940 as well was white Nebbiolo too. So it's an interesting fact about Nebbiolo as it ages.
To me, it was amazing because it was never recorded, that bottle. So when we opened it, actually the air inside the bottle was an 1878 air, which was crazy. But that's true. So especially because of the huge, maybe it's too technical, but the huge amount of potassium in these wines, which is this kind of savory, which is the good part, is the savory side. On the other hand, yes, makes it much, much easier for color to fall down. They're a bit less stable wines than others. Yes. I took 78 because this wine it's exactly 100 years older than I am. So that was fine for me. Go. Okay, so this is Sperino today. So this is the labels we actually produce. You have the, well, of course, Lessona. I couldn't use the original label again because of Ceparello, but so Lessona, it's along with Gattinara and Gemme, as I told before, it's one of the three appellations of Alto Piemonte that could be 100% Nebbiolo. So most of the appellations are obliged to blend. Those three can be 100% Nebbiolo or blend if they want. So none of the Alto Piemonte appellations are obliged to be pure Nebbiolo. We tried to do Lessona with 100% Nebbiolo. So at the moment, all that you will find as bottles as Lessona would be 100% Nebbiolo. Then you have the Uvaggio. Uvaggio means blend. And this was the way the, let's say, everyday wine was called in all the old books in the winery. So they had the Lessona as the big bottled wine, something that you would use in special occasions. And then they had the blend, the Uvaggio, which was the easier, younger, etc. Of course, the way we take care of the wine is more or less the same. So there is quite a good aging potential also on Uvaggio. It's more than 80% Nebbiolo, so it's Nebbiolo-based blend. It's a Costa della Sesia, so the appellation is the wider appellation. So the rules are quite loose. Actually, you can have Costa della Sesia made out of the Sperino or 50% Croatina, 50% Nebbiolo. There is no really big rules on it. So we do more or less 80% Nebbiolo, 15 Vespolina, 5% Croatina. And the grapes in Uvaggio come from the two different locations. So from Bramaterra and Lessona. Then you have the Rosato, Rosa del Rosa. So Rosa is the Monte Rosa, the second highest peak of the Alps, this is what we see from the vineyards. So I think it's a very funny wordplay because it's rosé from the Rosé Mountain somehow. So it's strange, and this is something that was not traditionally made in the area. When I started, that was 2005, our first vintage of Rosato. There was just one rosé made in the area, which was in Gemme, was Cantalupo Mimo, that you might have seen in the market. And that was the only one. Then in 2005, we had a huge hail in September, and I had to go out there and harvest. But the grapes were not mature at all for a red wine. And I said, what I'm going to do, and I decided to vinify as rosé. And I made the mistake to tell my father, which hasn't spoke to me for like a couple of months. So that was a terrible moment at the time. But then, honestly, it turned out to be something incredibly good for the area. In fact, today, everybody makes rosé in the area. They are all good. But this is actually the first, I'm really proud of it because somehow this has changed the style of rosé in Italy in general, honestly. Because usually rosé in Italy, they were saignée, they were bleeding rosé, very dark, a lot of residual sugar. And here we had a zero residual sugar, very, very acidic, very fresh, very light in color. Of course, at the beginning, it was something that we didn't know how to do. Rosé, it's different from the others. It's quite a technical wine. So we have silent still fermentation, temperature control. We do use cultivated yeast in rosé. So it's something that year after year, we really learn a bit better how to do. And I think I can say that, honestly, it's getting better and better every year. So I think the 2019 that you're about to receive, it's probably the vintage I prefer at the moment. It was not too warm as a vintage, so very fresh and aromatics. I think it will be very, very interesting.
Luca, let me interject too. We're going to receive the 2019 very shortly. I think early next, or actually next week, May 11th. I'm seeing right here the 2019. It's a shade under $20 retail, and we're excited to have it back. What was remarkable is when we received the 2018, it lasted maybe 2 days in our inventory. So it's definitely gaining a lot of momentum.
Yes, it was quite surprising because there was no history of rosé here, but it was immediately received as something that people wanted. I don't know, has created a small, probably this kind of combination of this low maturation, so very aromatic, with this kind of savory side and the freshness there, no residual sugar, so somehow very very clean but very savory. The last wine is something that well, that was a picture I already had. I think we didn't ship it to California yet. I don't know. This is a very small production. I made something around 11 to 1200 bottles of pure Cabernet Franc. I love Cabernet Franc. I always did so immediately. The first year, in the first vineyard, I did a few rows of Cabernet Franc, and because I thought because in Italy Cabernet Franc is always planted in Tuscany and Veneto, where you have a very warm growing conditions, but honestly in France it's a cold terroir variety, and all the Loire Valley, Saumur, etc., is sandy, acidic, sandy soils, and so I said you might try, and it's very small. It's 3 to 4 barriques every year, and somehow was I'm very impressed with the wine. I think shows very well what Alto Piemonte is, because it's incredibly powerful. You have more tannins than the Nebbiolo. It stays 5 years in barrique. So we are going to bottle next month, 2015. But somehow has very, very gentle way to drink. And so this is more or less Proprieta Sperino. I tried to stay in the, 40 minutes, so go.
So Luca, let me interject one more time. So I mentioned the Rosato. We're on the tail end of the 2015 vintage for the Uvaggio, and we're about to release pricing into the market here and get an order going with the 2016 vintage of Uvaggio. Yes. That'll be a shade under $40 retail, the Uvaggio. And then we are on the tail end of the 2013 and 2014 Lissona, and we are going to release the 2015 Lissona, and we will be releasing pricing there too. That's about $80 retail bottle of wine. So we're excited to start talking about your new vintages. So I imagine, like so many people in so many areas, 16, yes. I can't wait to taste the 16 Uvaggio, but I can imagine it's going to be spectacular.
16, it is a classic here in Piemonte, honestly. Had everything that you needed. So has freshness, has brightness, and has punching aromas. I mean, I really love 15. It's very, very lively now, but very easy drinking. It's both. It's something that you can keep forever, but you can enjoy immediately. So it's something very, very nice, but especially has this kind of very mineral and fresh finishing, which I love. Lissona 15 was a big vintage in terms of weather conditions. You know, I think it's quite known. It was very warm, which is actually not that bad in Alto Piemonte. I mean, we love to have time to time warmer vintages. It makes everything a bit easier. So you have a wine that is definitely more refined, more gentle, sweeter tannins than usual. I would say it's a bit more unapproachable Nebbiolo than what we usually bottle as Lissona. Let me see. I would say that if I had to for some, if you ever tasted, that would be not that far from 2009, for example. So a bit more approachable, aging potential, but I think something that would be very easy also to open when young.
Mm-hmm.
So we are very lucky because we are releasing two well-reputed and very, very well-known vintages at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Luca. I think we're kind of on the tail end of things, and I think everyone's going to be running along shortly. But what an honor.
All right.
I'm checking to see if there are any questions, but it's an honor to represent your wines and to resurrect this area of Lissona that was so popular for centuries and then kind of disappeared for a little bit and now is having a resurgence again too. I always drink Menabrea. One of my favorite
local
beers
beer.
in this area from Viella. So there's a lot of us that look forward to coming to visit you when we're
Yep.
back out and about and traveling.
As soon as we
and
can fly again.
As soon as we can. Christopher, if there's not any more questions, I'm going to wrap things up and just thank Luca one last time.
Thank you all. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Ciao. Grazie,
Ciao,
Luca.
ciao. Grazie.
Ciao.
Ciao.